Sort of, doesn't fancy it, then I'm quite happy, vote with your feet, get up, walk. I won't be offended, yeah? So this is a workshop, this is an interactive workshop. So a lot of in the tradition of interactive workshops, a lot of the work is done by the people in the groups, rather than necessarily somebody standing up at the front and talking a lot about stuff. So that's the intention of this. So the intention to go through and look at different types of projects, look at how we can address some of the issues, so why we're using projects and other ways we can address those issues. And that's going to be in group work, and with the intention that the groups will produce a poster to deliver back to the other groups in the room and foster discussion. So that's the general plan. I've got some crib sheets from previous session runs of interesting stuff that's come out that we can feed in. But this is not going to be 2 hours or 90 minutes of me standing up here talking about projects. Okay. So as I say, if anybody's not happy with that format, I won't be offended at all if you decide to go and quickly sneak and go somewhere else. Okay, well, that's encouraging to start with, right? I've given everybody the opt-out, and no complaints later. Right, okay, so let's make a start then. So what I want to do is just start with the abstract, so we all know the context we're starting from and where and what we're trying to do. So, good software provides value to its users and its purchasers. Most good software has a long life. And most software evolves continuously to adapt to its changing environment. And that's the environment changes, the needs of the users change, and so on. By contrast, a project, by definition, is a temporary structure. It's created to manage and deliver a specific goal. Some projects are run using agile software development techniques. And they've succeeded, and some of them have failed. What is it about the context of the ones that have succeeded that have meant they succeeded? And what is it about the ones that have failed that mean they've failed? And also, indeed, what was the definition of success? Was that part of why it succeeded or failed? Do projects even make sense in a truly agile environment? So what we're going to do, as I say, is we're going to work in groups and try and help each other come to some interesting answers to those questions, and then meld those ideas together. So let me start with a definition of a project. So this is from the PMI Institute of a definition of a project. So it's a temporary endeavour undertaken to create a unique product, service or result. A project is temporary in that it has a defined beginning and end in time, and therefore defined scope and resources. Now, that is the definition of a project. So when I'm talking about projects, that will be our definition of a project. Now, obviously we can spend, depending on what conference this was, we could spend the next half hour arguing about what a project is. But for the sake of argument, that's the definition. Okay, so I came up with the idea of this workshop together with a guy called Kevin Rutherford. And when we were going through this, we were saying, okay, well, if we've got that context, that's going to play an important part in how the applicability or not of the use of agile techniques and whether the project's likely to succeed or not. So part of the problem is we started to explore this space. We thought, well, there's all sorts of projects in all sorts of organisations, all sorts of shapes and sizes. And part of the thing there is, if you start talking at one level, if your context is here and somebody else's context is there, potentially you can be talking, that's insane, you never do that. Well, of course, it's common sense, it's completely, So what we decided to do is we said, okay, we've got to, if people are going to be discussing this, we've got to try and sort of get a certain amount of commonality of context. So it's a question of how you then slice and dice that. So what we came up with, a rough slicing of types of organisation, types that create software. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through that rough slicing and dicing. Again, people could argue about whether it's a good slicing and dicing or not, but this is what we're going to try and use. And once we've run through it, what I'll then ask people to do is to sort of try and gather together in groups around which is the most similar to their usual context. So, first type of organisation I'm going to posit might be interested in running projects would be a software agency. So again, so the definition of this would be that all the code, other than maybe some JavaScript libraries and a CMS or something like that, is bespoke. So you live in a world that is largely short-lived client projects. And you have project teams that deliver that. Now I know, again, there are some people who are starting to run agencies slightly differently than this, but that's the rough idea. And the defining, if you look at the code stack of the defining characters of when we're looking at that, for a typical engagement project, call it what you will, there's a certain amount of standard software at the bottom, and the rest of this is custom code that you create. So roughly, if that's the sort of business you're in, that's the sort of classification, and hopefully you'll share a common sort of context with other people who are in a similar business. So that's one. So that's look for another piece of wall. This isn't wall, is it? Right, stick it on the door instead. Right, so the second one is systems integrator. So you're creating bespoke systems, often using serious platforms like SAP to help you do that sort of thing. You live in a world of medium-term engagements with large clients who are paying you a reasonable amount of money to do this. And you tend to have project teams to deliver those pieces of software for large clients. So I should have said actually the examples, and the examples of the agency, I don't know any agencies. I found this out when I tried to come up with examples. So Razorfish was one that I know, and there was a local one in Manchester called Computer Love. I'm sure people have got other examples, but if anybody's not clear what an agency is, then ask somebody else and see if they can come up with a good example. Is anybody not clear what an agency is?
Well, I thought we were one until you...
Well, okay.
So I'm from Longshaw, and I would have thought we sit in the middle of those two. Yeah.
We've never, to my knowledge, in 40 years,
Okay.
never done a project with SAP.
No, fine.
Any such large, almost everything we do is bespoke.
Okay.
But it might be 10 years of bespoke development.
We're the same. We work for one agency, I guess. Merlin, all the theme park brands.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we don't tout for work, so I guess we belong to them, but all of our work, we have a team of 30 developers, we've built it all bespoke in-house.
Okay.
There's another distinction you can make, captive and non-captive. You're what I call captive, you have one client and you're in-house and you only work for them. Zorka's not captive in that they can work for anybody and they do work for lots of different people. You're servicing in a similar model, but he's not captive and you're captive.
I guess we don't belong to Merlin though. Like we do have some theatre branches and stuff, but Merlin pays the majority of our wage. But we don't really tout. We don't.
Okay.
No one would approach us to do work.
Okay. I mean, I'm quite, to be honest, I'm happy to change the classifications if it doesn't fit with the perceptions. If it's not right, then I'm quite happy to change the classifications.
Are there any others that you're going to put up?
Well, yes, I've got two others to put up. So, if we put okay. So the idea, I mean, the thinking was that in this sort of space, possibly, you might have a more of a chunk like this. So you might be producing less code, but obviously, that's not the case. So, next one up, software vendor. So I've run out of wall. That's how I'll bring the other one as well with me, so it's easier. Right, so software vendor. Small amounts of code, potentially bespoke, depending on how flexible you need to be for your customers. You live in a world of product development, selling to large clients and/or systems integrators, and you may have product or project teams. So depending on how you're structured, you may focus around products. The examples we came up with in this space, and again, if anybody thinks these examples don't fit, then do shout out. So things would be things like Canonical or NetSuite, Microsoft when they're producing some Dynamics, Heroku or SAP. And the thing there is then the amount of the bespoke bit of code, if anything, would be a very small bit. Everything will be the standard product. And then finally, it's going to have to be there. Software as a service. So where no code is bespoke. So you've got a single hosted product offering, and it's used by all your customers. So you might have project teams working on that, or you might have a sort of sub-products within there. So examples we came up with for things like that would be Spotify, BBC, Amazon, Auto Trader. So in that case, there is no bespoke code. You're producing, that's all standard, but you write it all.
Does that make it all bespoke?
No, I'm thinking in terms of the amount of change you make for a given customer. So you were.
I thought you meant bespoke as in off the shelf, or you write it yourself.
Yeah, that's okay. So this is right. No, good point. Good point. Yeah. So sorry. So this in this model, the idea would be that you are writing a lot of you're writing a lot of the code to deliver. It's a lot of custom code per client delivery. Under that sort of model, you're writing no custom code per client delivery, and then there's sort of variations in the middle.
So we only write custom code for clients.
Right.
That's all we do.
Okay.
But I guess what you're talking about there are the digital agencies, like the Northern Quarter is thick with, right?
Absolutely. That was our mental starting point.
6
Yes.
weeks here and 8 weeks there. We, I would argue the same is probably true for Thoughtworks. We only write custom code for clients, but we might be doing that for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years.
Yes. It's the length of engagement rather than the shape of the.
It's all bespoke.
Right.
And more importantly, it all belongs to them.
But does it all build on?
Then that I would sit in that camp.
Uh-huh.
So we write the majority of our codes bespoke,
Mm-hmm.
that we would use, for example, an already existing historian as our base. So we wouldn't write our own historian. We'd use one from a vendor,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would customise all the code around that. So we'd be over there. So
Yes.
we have large clients, long projects, but we'd still be over there because it's not all our software. We use other vendors. Put our products together.
Okay. So
We wouldn't write our own database.
yes.
We would.
Yeah, but this is
Absolutely.
per clients, what you're saying. So I work for Merlin, but there's no Manchester Thought. So we produce the software of their booking flow, and all of them get the same. So that put me as software as a service because they all get the same thing, and we build it completely bespoke.
When you say can build, if you build your own, if you're building a piece of software that's running software as a service, there's effectively one instance of it that's delivered out to all the customers, then that would be in that space.
Well,
Yeah.
also show that Amazon and the BBC and Spotify all spend all their time writing bespoke software.
But not bespoke for a particular customer, not for one customer.
Specific customer.
It's bespoke for them.
They have one.
Yes.
They have one product.
One, yes.
Well,
So it's isn't it? It's about
So
the
the
product.
new features on that product, but it's the same product forever.
I think the issue is that the word bespoke is confusing.
Yes. Okay. So right. So let's say since the word bespoke. So very, in this case, you're writing a lot of code that's specific for a given specific customer. In that case, you're writing no code for a given specific customer. You're writing it for a perceived market rather than the specific customer.
So I've got a software as a service business. The code we write, it's our code, it's our intellectual property. We own it. It's unique. It's totally unique.
Mm-hmm.
But the same code gets given to all of our customers.
gets given to,
Yeah.
or they use it.
Is used by.
Okay, the same code
Yeah.
is used by. We've got one platform. It gets badged up in different ways, but we've got one platform. They all use the same code base.
So that sounds like Microsoft. No, the fact you deliver the service rather than a CD is just an update on that.
Yeah.
So that's what we used to call an independent software vendor, ISV, which has become a software as a service supplier, SaaS. But it's a product and they take it or leave it. These two are about creating something specific and unique. I think that is a special case of that. SIs are software agencies who actually just happen to work more with a lot of existing things bringing together, whereas that is writing
Right.
more from
Okay.
scratch.
So again, so the purpose of trying to to introduce some sort of split is basically to try and make sure we don't have people with wildly mismatching contexts. So to that degree, I don't want to get too hung up on the split. But, so maybe it'd be better. By the sounds of the discussion, would it be better to just have two splits? Just again, this is just a way of trying to help triage people so they've got similar sort of context. So would it be a case of if you're writing a bunch of code for specific customers in order to deliver things for them, then this. It's this side. And if you're writing essentially a product that's pretty much unaltered when it goes out to different customers, it's that side. Would that be reasonable? Okay. So, what we'd look to do then is to say, right, if you can split out, so go and stand next to whichever. So if you say this is, so let's forget the systems. Let's bring the systems integrator over here, and forget the. So if you fit with this model, or these sorts of models, then well, if it's just whichever of those models you fit. If you could go and stand there, and then what we'll do is we'll split people out into groups based on which context they share.
So we're going to stand them together now after.
Yeah, and if you're at the level where you're working across all these types of things, then join something appropriate. Okay, so we've got two. So can we have sort of two groups of four by the looks of it, or one group of four and one group of five? Yeah. So if you can group yourselves together as one group and one group, and what we've got here, okay, so we've got a straggler. Are you joining in, Alan? Or are you?
No, I'll sit out. I'm too biased.
You're too biased.
Too opinionated.
Right. Is there somebody who's got who feels they could be in that sort of software vendor camp who might join in? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to create 2 3s. Yeah. If you join that. Yeah. Okay. So if you can work in those groups. Okay. So if you now reassemble, you can now decide which table you're going to land on as a group. Right, so I'm going to provide each group with a couple of sheets of flip chart paper and some Sharpies. And the objective is, what we're going to do is we're going to answer I'm going to ask you some questions. Now the objective is to work your way through these questions as a group, and then at the end of or partway through the session, we're going to look to have each group present back their thinking to the other groups and see what conclusions we've come up with.
Will you be a 6?
You could be a 6. If you want to be a 6, you'd be a 6.
Yeah, I think everybody's going to feel happy.
Okay. All right. So.
Can we be an 8?
So. Okay, so is everybody reasonably clear on the process? So answer the questions amongst you in your groups. Come up with a post. So draw that up in some way that you can then present it back. So typically groups will come up with a poster of some form. You can do, you cannot do. It's entirely up to you. The first question is, or the first stage is, describe to each other the typical projects in your type of organisation. Can you classify them in any way? So at this stage, don't get involved in critiquing them, whether they're the sensible way to do it or not a sensible way to do it. Just capture the types of projects that you employ and see if you can classify them. Okay?
I'm Ryan.
Different ways of managing and running that work that wouldn't involve using a project. So it's not a case of like evaluating good and bad at the moment. You know, again, it's that thing of like, are there any of the types of project that you've come up with that you could manage in a different way, and would that apply to the overall classification of projects? That makes sense.
Can you give that to me again?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So is there a way you can? So if you're running some sort of so let's think. Okay. So let's think about this. If you are, I'm trying to think of something that's not just going to sort of lead you down the particular line. So if you were to want to, I mean, the most obvious difference is between the classification. You know, if you've got a product, you know, software product, do you run it as a series of projects, or do you run it with an ongoing revenue stream? So that's, you know, that's the sort of things of you know. Could you actually run, rather than the places where you're using projects at the moment, could you actually apply different funding approaches, different people approaches? You know, so whether do you form project teams and then disassemble them again, and if so, you know, do you have ongoing teams? So what the characteristics of the projects of the projects that you're running? Could you run those pieces of work in a different way? Does that make any more sense? No? Okay. A trace from the types of projects that you've been working with, and then some alternative approaches that you might be able to take to those rather than a traditional project approach. The question then is, if you took one of those alternatives, what would be the pros and cons of taking that alternative versus delivering it in the project way that you might have been doing it so far? So that's the final question. Does that make sense?
Sorry, could you repeat that again?
This is just like at work, I say stuff and you just like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm getting all the words, but in no way.
Yeah, I know. This is just this horrible familiarity. So it's basically, what are the pros and cons so if you took one of those alternative approaches, instead of running it as a project, what would you see as being the pros and cons? What would you gain from running it that way? And what would you lose compared to running it as a traditional project? Okay.
So we found some alternative approaches.
So the approach I was thinking is rather than having like a sort of set up development team or service provider, each department has its own develop activity, so it's continuing to develop its own. So then I suppose when you get across the departments, who's going to run that?
And I would think would be that embedding thing, continuous development, the embedding thing, but that works for large projects.
Totally respect things, integrating things or improving things. I mean, the different types of projects being business improvement projects, could be regulatory projects or macro environment driven things, so sort of external influences. And we really struggled in terms of coming up with different approaches, but we figured it could be like a continuous improvement type approach where you just get a list of things and you continually deliver stuff versus the main sort of project approach. And the sort of reasoning behind or the pros and cons of each were, you know, obviously if you've got a fixed scope or a fixed budget or a fixed time frame, you might want to go down the project route, whereas if you're happy to sort of get things delivered as and when. You can go down the more sort of continuous improvement, build it into Agile. It's almost inferring that, you know, the business then becomes like a product, if you like you would do with your software. If you've got a product, it's easier to implement the sprint and improvements. So I guess we treat the business like that. So that was where we got to, but we did find it quite difficult to identify the differences and pros and cons.
I thought it was interesting listening into because you were talking at one point about trust that came up in the discussion. So
yeah, in terms of if you were going to go down the Agile route instead of traditional project approach that we've got now, then yeah, it would require that. Okay, we're going to take this approach now and sort of building that trust with the customers as to what the new approach is.
as a way of evolving to getting them to buy in more. And
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to lead them along the way, though. So the discussion that we had in the group, I managed to destroy it.
I have to work with him on a daily basis.
Was that an interim step might be that you need to feed the finance people, you need to feed the sponsors with something fairly rigid that shows progress. And you would do that perhaps through a reporting on things like sprints, and you would perhaps have a PMO that provided that information in the format that was required. But perhaps underneath, surreptitiously or not, you were in fact operating to an agile methodology whereby you were not actually doing what exactly it said in the sprint. The key one was back to the trust, that you had to deliver, and if you delivered, you would gain the trust, and then eventually, hopefully, the sort of the sprint idea or the onerous reporting side of things would become less of a requirement by the sponsors.
So the set of things that we'd normally associate with project delivery would start to become less accentuated or potentially disappear.
It's a possibility. I think it would depend on the organisation.
Okay.
I mean, the other point that I raised earlier was about what the definition of a project is, and the fact that a sprint could be treated as a project. So it sort of maps over, between the languads.
It's a very fine-grained project.
It's a set of work in a given time frame, 2 weeks, and these are the features. So that is actually a project. It's just calling it a sprint. Interesting.
Okay. Thank you. So what? Somebody want to present back the conclusions from the SAS jury?
I can give it a go.
Yes.
Tentatively not really understanding what everything is. So,
Hold it up, equally to be able to see.
It's got great pictures. Yeah, it's fantastic. So, should we just leave it at that?
Much better than what we've got.
The types of projects that you get a SaaS organisation, I think, to be honest with you, they're kind of common. I think it doesn't really matter what organisation you're in. You're going to have small, major enhancements, you're going to have new features, you're going to have R&D type work. So we think the ask is, well, if you're going to deliver that not as a project, what does that look like? And we were thinking, really, it's going to be a stream of work, but that stream of work has to be kind of target-driven. So it's looking at what are the strategic objectives of the business, and then making sure that anything that runs through that stream of work actually goes towards delivering that kind of bigger aim that the business has for the year. If you Google it, could be, we want to shave 10 milliseconds off our search times, or we want to increase ad revenue by 10%, whatever it might be. The stream of work, and this is probably like everyone knows this for our Agile conference, we're saying should be broken down into epics, stories, and initiatives. Each of these things delivered independently. So rather than saying, okay, well, I've got this stream, I might as well wait for 10 things to come together and then deploy it out. Well, actually, you should be delivering a constant stream of value out into your production environment. We're thinking about a project is quite structured, so you have a start and end of a fixed budget. What that doesn't do is it doesn't give you capacity to introduce, I think we call it Slack days here, you might know them as innovation days. So within this pipeline of work, still acknowledging that yes, you have to do some continuous improvement, yes, there's some stuff that you should do. In terms of the positives and negatives, positives down here, and I'll admit I was looking at email this time, so I'll do my best to go through that.
We admire your honesty about that. Yeah.
Positives,
European Agile.
tax regulations is a positive. Commitment to the external organisation, we get a consistent approach to quality, but there is some negatives. I mean, if you've got the same teams kind of working on a stream of work, there's going to be quite a lot of context switching depending on the composition of the stream at the time. And another positive is you're more responsive to change. So we've got 4 positives and 1 negative. So we'll go with this over.
So we say it's positive tax regulations. Sorry, could you just explain?
Yeah, wasn't that
Well, no, positive project.
Yeah, project.
Project. Ah, right.
So
Okay.
for accounting purposes and things, you can more like just
Yeah.
easier to.
Okay.
You can capitalise projects.
Yes.
Did I miss anything? Was that?
That's very good.
Cool. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. This one, so just to say that this is the 3rd time this has been run. So just a couple of things to throw in from things other people had brought up. So one of it's quite different. You get quite a different sort of shape to the work, to the conclusions people come to, depending on whether they're looking inside an organisation or outside an organisation. So if you're looking to actually talk to interact with customers and external customers who are asking you to deliver a chunk of work for them, there's several things that are interesting that came out. One of them is people who are working for public sector, where they're suppliers, software suppliers to the public sector. Said one of the problems they get is that because there's an imposed fairness. So they've got to pitch, they've got to tender, and they've got to structure things and say, we will deliver all this stuff in a particular time frame for a particular amount of money. And that in itself really gravitated against them being able to work in an agile way with that customer set. And the problem is there's a bit of a conversation that came up, related conversation that came up earlier about if people are coming to you with the project mindset, they're used to commissioning people, whether it's in the public sector or whether it's larger organisations, with fixed scope, fixed time frame, fixed money, then that itself will impose the same sort of constraints. So the question then is how you move away from that, which comes into the trust question. That if some organisations, whether by selective choice of customers and negotiation with them, are able to work in a more exploratory way in the early stages. So, do a bit of shared risk, shared reward, sign up for a certain amount of money, and we'll deliver something useful to you in that time frame, and then we'll sit down and talk again about what the rest of it looks like. Or whether it's like a lost leader where in that initial engagement you're going to lose money. In the 3 or 6 month project you're going to lose money, but you're buying trust essentially, so that downstream of that you can then start to work in a more agile way where you can start swapping things in and out and you can't start trading off, as opposed to having to deliver a fixed chunk of stuff in an initial time frame. So I think that
Public sector
Sorry.
side is a huge minefield in so much as, when they go over a certain revenue, they're obliged to go to tender.
indeed.
And then the respondents, if they then don't deliver, can get challenged by one of the bidders that failed, one of the failed bidders.
Indeed, and this is why. So again, it's a whole thing about some of the context that you're working in may gravitate against you doing anything in an agile way. You may as well say, well, if we're looking to be dynamic, why do we want to be agile? We want to be able to change the requirements. We want to adapt to change in understanding as we go. If there is a fixed imposition of understanding at the start of what needs to be delivered, then as part of that sort of tender process, because essentially somebody could say, well, hang on, we were asked to deliver that, and in fact they've delivered this, and therefore the tender was unfair because they've changed the rules part way through. That in itself, that suggest that really trying to work in an agile way in that sort of context is just, you get very limited benefits, let's put it that way.
So yeah, kind of a cynical advantage of projects is that you can undercut the other people who have tendered in a way that is unfeasible and you can never deliver on. But by the time they've locked into it and realised that it's all going south, then it doesn't matter because everyone's committed and they'll lose so much face if they back out the thing at that point. And basically you've locked them into continuing the business.
Yes.
So that's an advantage of projects.
Indeed, yeah, depends on your business model.
Changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's,
Should these conferences, it feels sometimes like we're talking to the wrong people. And actually what we need to do is to find the customers of what we do.
yes.
And do an agile conference for them where we explain to them the benefits of how we will work with them to them.
Well, I think part of it is part of this sort of thing. Hopefully, is to try and you know, if you're thinking more about these aspects of context, more about what the forces are in play, then to provide you with a better mental tool set that you can bring to that sort of.
To equip us to have those discussions with them. But
yeah, I think that's the best we can do as things are structured.
Is it the best we can
No.
do? I don't know.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so I think that's probably the main thing that was missing from the people brought up in other places. So that hasn't come to light here already. So thank you for your time and efforts.